Cool. Jock, do you want to start us off?
I can, and I appreciate that, Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Williams. Um, and I want to add a caveat to this. I am at a professional development currently in Colorado in some mountains, and they only gave me a few minutes, so I will only be with you guys for a short period of time. I did want to make sure that we had a quorum today, and that we went over some of the initial issues, and then I will hand it over to you, Mr. Co-Chair, and for you to do the remaining meeting. But I did want to make sure that our first meeting, that we could get it on the records and that we had a great agenda and the discussion started. So with that being said, I'll go to, starting with the agenda. And if we can have the establishment of a quorum, um, it looks as if we do, but I'll do a roll call very quickly. Um, Co-Chair Representative Williams, Representative Chang, and Representative Goulet.
Hey.
All right. Thank you guys for showing up. A lot of the things I did ask as agenda item number one that number two, that we went over some of the assessments and accountability work. And I hope you were able to look at some of those things. And the reason I thought that was important, just to kind of know where specifically Representative Williams, your predecessor, and I left off with that. And this kind of blends into a lot of those things. And I believe that some of the work that we have going forward will kind of be built upon those things that happened in the prior session. Um, I think one of the biggest priorities that we have is going to be the second phase of the accountability framework, which will happen pretty in fast order. If I'm not mistaken, understanding what OSSI has on its plate after social studies is finally completed, I think they will turn to the actual design. And a lot of the work has already been done as far as some of the engagement that we did and what we found out previously in the first session, about what they wanted to design, but there's still a lot of work to do between us and OSSI. And I just wanted us to be cognizant of what went into that, some of the things that were said, some of the things that were voted on in the resolutions, why we made the changes that we did. The main thing coming out of that is that nobody wants a star on anything that is going to be published. And we promised the community that that would not happen. We talked about dashboards, that we would make sure we would kind of design some type of dashboard, but we'll go to the community to kind of decide what that is. Ossie, I know from talking to Dr. Grant, is looking forward to engaging us in that design work, so that it is equitable. It doesn't, allow one school to be able to look better than another school just because of what type of school it is. And we just want to be very fair, but give parents the information that they need and be in compliance with the ESSA. So that will probably be our first kind of order of things that we'll have coming down the pipeline. From there, I'm kind of going to turn it over to you, sir, for that at this particular point, because that was the main thing that I brought as far as a co-chair, was just that particular work. I know in its new iteration, there are other things that this committee may want to do, and I'm very open to that. And I think we do have to pivot once we do that. So with that being said, those were two very big items on my list as co-chair. I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. And I echo everything you said about the accountability framework. I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Grant yesterday in a one-on-one meeting, because she was arranging meetings with new board members. And she was saying that, in the summer, OSSI will give us kind of a timeline of what that work can look like moving forward. And there's really a lot of freedom and a lot of experience in kind of how we move forward with the work, because Dr. Grant also had a stake in designing the school accountability system in Philadelphia. And so she has experience with that. On top of that, there aren't so many requirements that we have to be in compliance with outside of reporting out the bottom 5% of schools in the district. And so how we, or if we group schools, can be part of the discussion that we talk about. Obviously, staying away and continuing the legacy of moving away from stars, but still giving families meaningful information to make the best decisions for their kids. So that's not something that I feel like, I feel necessarily we need to dig into right now, but I just wanted to also name that as work that is coming down the pipeline for this committee. Before I kind of move on, Representative Goulet or Representative Chang, do you have anything to add with regards to questions, comments, concerns with regards to the accountability framework or any OSSE engagement? And I guess the last thing I'll say there is that OSSE, Dr. Grant also told me that in reference to the accountability framework, differently how we kind of did the engagement with OSSE did their engagement with the social studies standards before the state board, and then we kind of continued our work with engagement of social studies standards separately. There's an opportunity to really join forces with that and do it concurrently when we move forward with the accountability framework, so we can be kind of more united in that effort of outreach.
Right. And just so those who were not here before, I know Representative Chang was here, but they were very collaborative when we were doing that aspect. I really appreciate how much concessions they made as far as listening to the engagement that we had around the accountability framework and making sure that when they finally, looked at our resolution and then presented what they had to do, what we had to pass for new amendments, that they were very open to things like, we had a big debate between growth and proficiency and how we wanted to weight that. So a lot of that work, that was what had to be done first and forehand, is what were going to be the weights on certain aspects before we could actually put them into the design of the school report card. And they were just very collaborative. I mean, we had a really good collaborative. And so I appreciate OSSE continuing in that spirit with us. And I think, us as a group, as a committee, will enjoy that work together and how we design that out. So I do appreciate that.
Well, I just want to thank you both for having me on here. Apologize for being on a few minutes late here, but I like the layout of it. I'm just excited to work with, the four of us here. And, I think you've got a good strategy and I like the agenda. So I don't want to take any of our time here. Should we kick it back to the co-chairs here then?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, Representative, thank you, Representative Goulet. Representative Chang, do you have anything you'd like to add into the context of the accountability framework before we move forward?
Please move ahead.
Cool. So yeah, moving on, the next item is just, state level and system policy committee meeting schedule. So wanted to kind of open that up for a floor of discussion. I would love for us to be able to be responsive to the needs of the work as it comes about, and Representative Patterson and I had kind of talked about, finding a more regular time, potentially like on a Friday afternoon, something that would fit more regularly with our schedules, but at the same time kind of being mindful that if there isn't a particular action item that we feel like we need to meet about, then not forcing ourselves to meet. So I'm kind of open and just willing to operate with some flexibility around that, and wanted to kind of open that up. This does lead into kind of the next thing, so I'll name it right now and then we can move forward. But there is work right now around teacher turnover in the council, with Robert White's new legislation, and that is something that I feel very passionately about addressing on the board. And as I'm sure people know, right, the numbers in recent years have been staggering, and so I would like for us to kind of be able to address that as we move into the summer, so that we can look for ways to be able to stop that exodus and support teachers in the upcoming school year. So whether that means meeting in May or June, I'm open to that. But it seems to me that a monthly meeting at this juncture, given the approval of the social studies standards committee or standards, and then also the teacher turnover legislation, feels pertinent for our committee to address. What are others' thoughts?
Do you want to go ahead, Jeff?
Go right ahead, sir.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think if we've got business before us, and we're going to be having a meeting where maybe we want to even invite public comment. I'm fully supportive of having a flexible schedule on this. I mean, I work, pretty much 9 to 5:30, every day, but I can fit in meetings like this, during the workday. I think we should try to, whenever possible, if we're looking at something that does, probably going to interest the public, that we try to make a time available where they're able to come in and we can hear from teachers. So I'm willing even to give up a weekend if we want to have a session. As we get into this, I think you got a good subject there with trying to look at the teacher retention, but maybe we'll have some time to hear from some teachers over the weekend or in an evening, because I know during the school day they're teaching. Maybe over the summer we'll have that opportunity. But I think we should keep the schedule flexible. We'll just we'll make it work, and that we make time to hear from folks, because that's how we're going to make the best result in this. And I just thank Representative Williams for raising the issue of teacher turnover. I think that's important, and I'm excited to work with you on it. And same with you, Councilmember Patterson. Not Councilmember. Gosh.
Yeah, you got to stop doing that, sir.
Well,
I appreciate it, because I have no aspiration. Let me put it on the record. I have no aspirations. But
it's
what I
actually
will
Kathy
say,
Patterson that's messing me up with that. Former council member Kathy
I know,
Patterson.
since there was
So,
actually a Councilman
Representative
Patterson at one point.
And I'll just add on the flexibility, like changing the schedules, just as long as we have the appropriate amount of notice, so we can make sure things end up in the DC Register, and we're in compliance with open meetings. We would need, like, not infinite flexibility, but just keeping that in mind as we set.
Right. And I appreciate that so much, Kathleen. Just a bit of history and background is that with a lot of committees, it really was, the meetings were generated by the work that was being done. The assessment and accountability met regularly because it was such a fierce topic at the very beginning, and kind of waned later after the resolution and amendments were passed, and there was not a requirement to meet every single month. And I think that's the situation here. I'm in agreement with my co-chair in the sense of we'll meet the requirements as the subjects come up, and definitely hear you, Kathleen, about making sure you have notice so we can allow for the sunshine rules and transparency to be there. But we don't have to say, okay, every Friday we're going to meet at 12 o'clock or, once a month, whatever, that's what kind of was happening. We don't have to do that. I think we all have busy schedules, but when the subject matter presents itself and we have the time and make sure that we can get the notice in for the register, that we should meet and address the issues and things. So I'm in agreement with that and have no problem with it.
Great. Yeah, the thing I'd like to just flag for us around that, and I appreciate, Representative Goulet's point around, in having this be kind of an open body for people to join us and comment, is like, if we wanted to have a particular constituency, whether it be teachers or parents or whatnot, to be able to give them notice. So I think that we should work to hold ourselves accountable to a week or whatever ample time people need to be able to plan around being involved in that work.
And we have had panelists in the past, just so you know, that the committees themselves, not just in the regular full body meetings, but that the committees have had panelists that we want to put together, certain panelists that we want to bring forward. Just long as Kathleen has notice and everything, we can put those together and then have that type of meeting where somebody is coming to present, just like on the other one, but just specifically on those particular subjects. We had at least 4 different ones on the framework, different panels that came and spoke to the committee on different things, professors from different areas. We looked at different report cards. So if we're looking at teacher retention, turnover, and things like that, and we wanted to bring in someone who has been addressing the issue, that is something that we can look into as well. And those are very good meetings. They're very well attended as well. They get the public, the general public, to come out for the committee meetings as well as the other meetings.
I like that. Thanks for sharing that, Representative Patterson. Along the lines of teacher turnover, this is my other main point, and then we can just keep moving on to the next item of business. Is I would love to see our committee be able, in the context of teacher turnover, and in somewhat connection to the work of the accountability system, although albeit different, look at teacher evaluation and be able to play a role in being able to support teacher growth. We know that impact drives is one of the main reasons cited by teachers in DCPS for leaving the classroom and as a source of considerable stress. And we also know that there are in certain LEAs, systems that are working really well and systems that aren't. And I would love for us to be able to play an advisory role in the capacity for our city, similar to, not necessarily directly related to our statutory authority, but related in looking at how we can bring together both DCPS interest and charter interests to be able to look at how we are promoting the profession so that teachers are improving. Because when teachers are improving, they feel more motivated by the work, and students and families benefit from that. So I just wanted to kind of be, in the spirit of transparency, let people know that I have talked with other representatives and Representative Best, Representative O'Leary, Representative Reed, Representative Henderson have all voiced interest in being able to serve as an advisory role for the board in looking at impact, and have also had conversations with council members who feel like this might be the time to take that on, also in conjunction with the legislation by Councilmember White's office. I'm not necessarily looking to, overhaul something without knowing what will work, but we do have a lot of models in neighboring school districts like Montgomery County and other places nearby that I think really could serve to improve school culture. And so I just kind of wanted to get people's reactions on, in our next meeting, kind of seeing how we could think more strategically about working on teacher evaluation in the context of reducing teacher turnover.
And I'll give my 2 bits, and then I have to jump off. I'm definitely for getting in that arena. I would like to know what would be our end product as well. Would that end in some type of resolution that we will put forth that after doing engagement with all teachers in the DCPS system and everything, since the impact is only them, that once we do that we would issue some type of resolution based on that. Would just like to know what would be the end product, but I definitely think because it's in our title as advisory, that and statutory wise, that we should engage in this area, because teachers, educators, which I have one that is part of my family, are very, it impacts them. Their evaluations is so important to them making the decision to stay or go in our system. And I think we should be more boisterous. I think we should use our bully pulpit and the representative offices that we have to elevate this issue and bring it to the larger public. So I'm in agreement with you. The only thing I would like to know more about is what will be the end product after we do the engagement. What would that look like?
That's a good push and something that I'll give more thought to.
And I'll think about that as well, Representative Patterson, and Representative Williams. I'm definitely happy to look at all of those issues with you. I think it's important to look at this. And when you look at impact, looking at that versus other evaluation systems throughout the country, I think we need an accountability system, but one that, we always need to be open to reevaluating. If you don't reevaluate things regularly, then you're not doing your due diligence. So I think that's a great thing to look at. I'm happy to have that discussion, and I want to hear from teachers and then also administrators on that side to just hear both sides of how the system works now, ways that we could improve it. And I think that's a great topic, and either to do a resolution. I don't want to get just wedded to Robert White's legislation. I mean, I think we should take a fresh look at it too, and just see holistically what we may recommend. And Representative, oh, he's just off. I was gonna see if he had any last words, but yeah, I just want to echo what Representative Patterson said. I'm excited to work with you on that, and I think it will be something good. Can I ask, are we doing anything on social studies in this, or is that just before the full board right now?
I think that's open for conversation. I think let's follow back up with that when we move to new business.
Okay.
But that's a good plug for evaluating what role we want to play on social studies.
Okay.
Yep. And then any comments or reactions to the topic of teacher evaluation or anything within teacher turnover, Representative Chang?
Thanks for asking, Ben. I don't have anything substantial to add at this time. No, thank you.
All right. Well, that'll move us into new business. So I wanted to briefly just touch on literacy, also on the social studies standards, and then anything that anyone else had to bring forth today. So Representative Chang, in my conversation with Dr. Grant yesterday, I was able to learn just that, they right now are that teachers will be able to apply for training for letters starting this summer, which I imagine you're aware of, and they're kind of figuring out what the capacity of that looks like. And I was really heartened by hearing Dr. Grant's commitment to really following the recommendations of the task force. So she seemed to kind of mention, and I just wanted to run it by you, that there would be certain recommendations that would be brought forth in July, and then those would kind of be hopefully finalized or more concretized by September. So I wanted to get your thoughts and reactions on both the accessibility of literacy training this summer for DC teachers, and also the timeline of the work that the task force is doing.
Yeah. First, thank you. And it sounds like the conversation went well. And I am feeling, I think I shared this with you, very positive about the direction that the task force is taking. And the last meeting was very substantial. We really got into the weeds, and I find that really promising. So the question you're asking is, I think, not as easy to. It's more complex to answer than simply, yes, there's capacity, no, there's not. So I had the chance to meet with Dr. Bear of the DC Reading Clinic last week, and thinking through the capacity of one, teachers and educators to actually take on an additional work without having something else taken off their plate is something that came up that I really want to flag, and making sure that we are again, not just funding training, but also thinking about everything that needs to go around training to make that training actually useful, right? There's enough data from other states now that says training, when it's done thoughtfully, transformatively impactful. Training, when it's not done thoughtfully, no results, right? So want to make sure that when we do this, we do it in a coherent and thoughtful way. So want to be bumping up the capacity, and also do think it's really important for us to be working with other agencies and making sure that the recommendations that the task force puts out at the end of this year are aligned with, right, making sure that, yes, we need to fund training, but that needs to come with a really thoughtful integration into the teachers' day-to-day, right, educators' day-to-day schedules. It needs to be really thoughtfully aligned with assessments, with curriculum, with standards, right? And so long way to say, I think those are all, I have more and more confidence that the task force will be able to answer those questions by the end of, by the last session that's scheduled. And do think that those questions have to be answered before I can give a very straightforward response to, where are we right now and where should we be over the summer.
I appreciate that. And what is that date of the last meeting? or like just month, not like particular like day, but just to have a sense of the timeline?
Kathleen, do you have that off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but if you give me 10 seconds, I can get it.
Awesome, thank you. And then I just in follow.
July 28th is the last meeting.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. And so then, Representative Jake, would you like for this committee to kind of, what, I guess, what role would you like our committee to play in monitoring and supporting that work?
Well, I think this is a question, right, of prioritization, capacity, and also interest and also efficacy, right? So what I will say is I think that the task force's recommendations will only be taken as seriously as as we actually make sure that this work is prioritized when it comes out. And that if I'm backwards mapping, right? So one thing that, there are multiple ways that this still doesn't lead to the results we want to see. One is task force makes a recommendation that's bold and evidence-based, and the city doesn't actually follow through on those recommendations. If we back up, earlier in the timeline, there is also another point where, things could go wrong, which is that the task force doesn't make bold evidence-based recommendations. And so absolutely would love as much support as I think we can get from all stakeholders to make sure that we are making bold evidence-based recommendations in the task force, and that once they come out, they're actually followed upon, right? So, but to me, those are the long-term goals are possible if we do those two things right. The shorter-term goals of making sure that we have enough training to fill the pipeline, capacity to train the teachers who want to receive this summer, very important to me. And I don't want to lose sight of the longer term goals. I think to me, the top priority is to make sure that those two longer term, bigger, kind of broader goals get done right.
Yeah, I respect that, and I think there are multiple pieces to this puzzle, but especially just being in the classroom, right, wanting to make sure that we are considering each stakeholder like with intent, and knowing that teachers are going to be making plans about their summers and their schools and those types of things, to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to promote awareness, and both across DCPS and charter LEAs, so that so that there is training. The other topic that I kind of talked to Dr. Grant about was just like, what does that look like, with regards to not just supporting like a K2 teacher, right, but like supporting, middle school literacy instruction and high school literacy instruction. And so, while that's also super important, like I want to try and get it right around, the early grades, because if we can be preventative in our approach, then we can eliminate reading gaps, as kids matriculate to later elementary years and middle school. So at this point, right, I think the other thing that I'll just name for us so that it's on people's radar is that at a meeting with it was kind of PAVE's budget forum, I was able to talk to the director of the DC Policy Center, and her kind of like big takeaway from me was that DC doesn't currently have a way of measuring student literacy until 4th grade when kids take park. And so at that point,
it's a huge problem, and there's so many parents over the last 2 years who've emailed me and written, I did not know that my kid was not reading at grade level until it was too late. And that is heartbreaking.
So I would love for us to kind of, there's many other ways, both nationally and internationally, that other places do it much better. And so I would just be hopeful that that's included in the task force recommendation. But then for us to think,
if I may, actually, this is an enforcement question that I don't know if it's part of this committee's work, but those things are in the dyslexia legislation. The question is not that, right? The recommendation is already been, it's already been done. The question now is, how do we actually implement the policy? And that is a different question to me, right? Because yeah.
Sorry, can I just add a point of clarification? Most, I don't want to say all schools, I haven't been to all schools, but I would say most elementary schools do have ways of measuring student literacy. It's just not like a standardized statewide assessment the way that Park or NAEP would be. So it's not like the students are not being assessed in literacy. And then Ben, you mentioned upper grades and like literacy recommendations for them. That is part of the task force legislation, is to come up with recommendations around that.
right. So want to kind of just make one final point, and then Representative Goulet, if you want to weigh in on this at all. So I want this committee to kind of continue to stay abreast of that work. I think given that we do still have three important topics, with that being literacy, turnover, social studies standards, and then that I feel that we would benefit from a May meeting. So I'd like to be able to follow up on all three of those topics in May, if I want to get people's thoughts on that. Representative Goulet.
Well, I'm absolutely good with the May meeting. What will we be following up on? Like, what are the next steps is what I guess I'm wondering on this. And I want to commend Representative Chang for his work on literacy. Completely agree with the need to assess thoroughly before grade 4, because at that point, it's too late. So the more we can do to make sure that we're enforcing that law, the better. And I'm all in for a May meeting. I just want to make sure that we know what we're trying to get done. We've got Kathleen here to help us, which is fantastic. And maybe I can just follow up with you, on kind of what some of your ideas are on next steps, because it would be great if we could get, folks in the community who are interested in these issues to help us, push forward to whatever goal we're looking for, whether it be a report on this, a resolution where we have recommendations, and or even we could write legislation. I guess put that through the state board, and then propose that to the council from the state board. So it could take a variety of forms, and depending on what we decide we want to do with it, and we may not know ahead of time. We may see what the group of the public or experts say we should do, and then we decide, well, maybe it's a resolution, maybe it's working with OSSI, or maybe it's legislation. And maybe that's the discussion we have in May. It's just kind of figuring out what the process is in each of those. Try to get it through. But I like your agenda items on this for sure. I'll have a couple other ideas under new business, but not now.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to think through that too, still adjusting obviously to the role of co-committee chair, and figuring out how this work planning document becomes useful and lives, and kind of documents the work, but also plans and drives the work. So Kathleen, I'm happy to kind of follow up with you on that offline, and then update the rest of the committee before our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I think it sounds like some people have expressed places where to me sounded like it was a question around work planning. So Eric, what you just said, and what Jacques said earlier, I don't remember what it was, but I said sounds like a work planning question in the chat. So I think, if people had ideas now they wanted to share about like actual action steps or outcomes that we wanted to backward plan towards, I don't know if you wanted to like field those now and like brainstorm, or if you wanted to like follow up with people online.
Well, I can brainstorm on some ideas on each of these if you want. Does that sound good, Representative Williams? We'll just do it here.
Sure.
Okay, so I mean, the issue of teacher retention, we'll start with that one since that was the first one I think we named on here. You know, I think the evaluation system is important to look at. A lot of teachers raised that with me while I was campaigning. I'd love to know if there are ways we can tweak impact, or if there's another evaluation system that's preferable, you know, but also, you know, delivers, you know, better results, then we'll look at that. I mean, the issue of housing was a huge issue that I heard a lot of, just the cost of housing in DC, how we make it possible for teachers to be able to raise a family in the city. We were losing a lot of teachers, you know, because they just said, well, if I want to try to get a house with a backyard or any house at all, I can't afford DC. So, I mean, trying to address that issue, and that may be an issue where we propose legislation, we propose a budget item, and that would be separate from a resolution. It'd be something we would send to the council for next year's budget process or to the mayor. Issue of compensation, I'd love to look at, you know, how teachers are compensated versus cost of living in DC, and then compare that to other jurisdictions. And then specifically this issue, huge issue in Ward 3, but the issue of class size, and we have a really severe overcrowding issue in Ward 3, and I heard from a lot of teachers at both Deal and Jackson Reed that the class size issue and is really problematic for them. And then as more students come into the school, it's not just the individual size of the classes, is they'll take planning periods away from teachers because they don't have enough staff to cover lunch, to make sure kids are moving securely through the school. And Representative Williams, you probably know these issues better than me, but like that's something right there that if you lose planning periods, you know, you're having to do that at home because you got to plan. So
I would say that that was a large factor in my
was
deciding
it?
not to teach this year. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's important. And that's what I heard over and over again was it's about overcrowding. And then, you know, when you have a class that's too big, there's discipline issues because you can't keep the class under control. So these are all things teachers are telling me. And I think it all fits into what you're looking at here is we just try to look holistically because I mean, both my parents were teachers growing up. I want to be able to keep our teachers in DC and make this a place where, you know, if you're a young teacher, this is a place to come to teach. So I'm completely in on that. I mean, the idea of literacy, I think, is important. And then we had a third one. You named three: social studies, right?
Yes.
So social studies, I would love for this to be the committee where all the great information that Kathleen's been collecting flows. So we've been getting feedback from the public, assuming, you know, we decide, you know, that it's our turn with this, that we're going to make edits to this thing and send them kind of a red line back. I feel like this is the committee to do that work and say, here's our kind of our revisions to this, unless we're so comfortable with it. Is that right or is that not right?
Yes, this will be the committee that does stuff on standards. I will say that in order for OSSI to be able to make edits and then like respond to feedback and then get a final version of the standards to us by June, I think we're trying to finish up doing that feedback fairly soon. So if you have anything, please send it to me. I know Robert Henderson sent me some
I'll
comments
send
that he had, but I just don't want to like hold up the whole process because it has implications for the teacher training and the curriculum and everything else happening.
And I understand that. I know there's a lot more comfort level with the standards right now than there was when they came out for certain. But even at our meeting last night, we had the 1 hour session. There's still recommendations for changes. And
right. And so we'll provide those with us. We'll provide those to OSSI. I just don't want it to be like us to plan for long term on the committee to be working on that.
Well, I don't think long term. And I would look to the co-chairs to give me guidance on this. I mean, Representative Williams, you know this better than I do. You teach this for a living, right? Social studies. So I would look to you to know how close we are to where we should be with these standards. But if we feel like we're we've got work to do on the state board side. I'm not afraid of saying to OSSI, you know, like this doesn't come around often where we look at standards like this. And it's probably one of the most important roles that we have. So if we feel like we need to go through our due diligence and send them a red line back or something on this.
I will be sending them a red line one back. That's
Okay.
not to say we're not doing that. I'm making it currently.
But I just want to make sure that like the co-chairs of this committee, because they're going to be recommending to the whole board on this, so that after you get your recommendations done, Kathleen, who I would look to on this is I would look specifically to Representative Williams, and I would look to Representative, well, I guess to the whole committee, we look at it holistically, but just to make sure we're comfortable with it, because then we're making a recommendation to the board, right? I think that's how it should work, but
I think an update on the status of the work. You know, I think in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathleen, but given that these committees are just set up, like to me, the ownership of the work, even though now it lives with us, has been more diffuse. In which, you know, us just joining the board this past year, like there was already ongoing work previously. But to your point, you know, Representative Goulet, like I want us to be respectful of the collaboration with OSSI, but not feel pressured to adopt a timeline that we don't think best serves the public. And you know, there were considerable insight that came out, you know, from when we go through each of them and ask follow-up questions and try to get away from a lot of vagaries that are in the standards. So you know, I felt like, you know, just as a rudimentary like evaluation, we're like, you know, maybe 70-75% there. You know, but want to make sure that we, you know, do the best job that we can on this final you know, kind of set of revisions. And if that means, you know, pushing back a vote to July or August, like I'm very comfortable with that.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's all I was gonna add.
But no, I'm just going to support whatever you and Representative Patterson recommend on this. So, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my newsletter out this weekend to the folks in Ward 3, encourage them to send recommendations through Kathleen. So that way we all get to see them. I think that's the right approach on this, right? Is make sure Kathleen gets the recommendations coming in. And then we as a committee, you'd make a recommendation on that. I see Representative Chang.
Representative Chang actually chaired the Education Standards Committee last year.
Okay, so
he has actually been working on the social studies standards longer than I have.
I was actually going to turn it back to you, Kathleen.
Oh no!
I was wondering if there are any other and if these are the right steps in your mind. Are we missing anything in today's agenda that you think we need to cover in the last 10 minutes, or anything that we could we need to sort out to be able to answer Representative Goulet's question?
I would say I feel like it would be prudent to talk to the board leadership, because I know they've been sort of trying to discuss with OSSI, and they have in the past negotiated the timeline for us, like in terms of public comment, they got that extended. And so if we would like to do that, I think it would be important to loop them in on it. And just sort of, I would also like to highlight going forward that whenever we approve social studies, we do have other standards sort of coming towards us. So we know about the financial literacy. OSSI brought it up during their budget oversight hearing. I forgot the word budget for a second. And that they will be bringing standards related to that. And I know that some of the council members have reintroduced the financial literacy education bill this cycle. So I think we're trying to do that from sort of a policy and not a legislation perspective. But we do know that that is coming and will require sort of substantial public engagement around that, because there were a number of questions about the best ways to implement it that are the reason that it was not included in social studies, because there was so many sort of open questions about the best way to do it. And so I think that would be an opportunity for this committee to do some research or public engagement around that, so it's not just something that's like pushed through without really considering those questions.
Very
Yeah,
good.
But
what's
also
your
like not
deadline?
encouraging people to do to legislate when it's something that's our statutory duties.
I was just gonna see what your deadline was for getting comments in.
For social studies?
Yeah.
Can I talk to Bernice tomorrow morning to just check
Sure.
and get back to you?
I'll just want to send it out in the newsletter, give people a hard deadline by which they've got to get you the comments.
Okay, let me check.
And yeah, Kathleen, if you could follow up with all of us on that, that'd be great.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just to move us along and to continue respecting folks' time, are there any new items of business that we feel like we need to discuss right now? I know there's some follow-up that I want to do around thinking through and contemplating next steps that I will send out via email. But Representative Chang or Representative Goulet, any new items of business before we adjourn today?
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Where do we leave Representative Goulet's question? It's you'll check with Bernice, and
Yes, I will
Rep
ask.
Goulet will send it out in his newsletter, continuing to collect feedback. Yeah.
I will check with Bernice on the timeline tomorrow morning, and then I will respond to all of you, letting you know. And Eric is going to send, or Representative Goulet is going to send it out to his constituents.
Rep Goulet, would you also send the task force literacy survey as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to put that in the newsletter.
And if you have networks who are any DC high school students, you could invite to Pride Prom too. Love that to go in the newsletter too.
And I would love to help chaperone that. I know you sent the request.
Oh yeah,
I was just
please.
Up. So
That would be amazing.
Let me connect with you on that. I just want to make sure I work it around my schedule with my
Of course.
kids. But yeah, I'm 100% in on and excited for it. So I'll double.
And if their school has somewhere to post it too, that would be great.
Well, and the thing is, like right now, my newsletter is basically just for the listservs. We're going to try to get an email list together, but I've got to get the MailChimp stuff up so we don't keep getting all the things blocked that go through it. So that may be a summer project. I may just use the listservs until then, but I'll put the link up to the task force, the literacy study link, and then also the announcement of Pride Prom.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So yeah, just to then circle back, I have no new items of business, but just wanted to open the floor again before we adjourn to any additional items for today's committee meeting.
No new business on my side. I think it's more of a Kathleen named that I had chaired one of the committees last year, and I think what I learned was, because of the way that we're structured and how things move within our system, that we had the most success last year when we chose to do fewer things really, really well, rather than try to do a lot of things but just on the surface. And so that would be my final ask to you and our other co-chair, Representative Patterson, to take what you hear from us and trust you to choose how we prioritize. But the more I think we can actually focus in on having this committee really, really define success for the end of the year around a few very specific things and really push those forward, I think we'll actually be able to get those few things done, and hope we can achieve that.
Sounds good. I'll definitely take that into account.
If anyone has any work plan or budget requests, since we'll be presenting those at the May working session as a committee, would you like people to follow up via email, or how? I'm trying to get us to our action items so we can be brief, as Representative Chang encouraged.
I think email works for me, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Any additional items, Representative Goulet?
I think I'll follow up with you on a call. I really want to heed Representative Chang's advice and not try to overload us with a lot of different things. But I mean, my number one issue is that we sit in the nation's capital with 25% of our kids not graduating still. So anything that we do to have a focus on how we do that, I think literacy is a huge part of it. And then also, you know, for me, it may not be in this committee, but the idea of trying to get uh, something where we do out of school time programming so that all our youth have a positive activity that they're connected to. It may be outside what this committee does. That may be something I pursue on my own, but I'll just chat with you, Representative Williams, about that, you know, afterwards. And let's move this along today. So I won't talk about it here.
Yeah, I'm happy to think through that. Awesome. Kathleen, any final items for us?
I don't believe so. Unless you would, do you want to set a date for the next meeting now, or do you want to wait on that?
I'll send out a Google poll and kind of talk with Representative Patterson before kind of engaging everyone else.
Okay. I believe that's all I have.
All right. Any motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you all for being here and for your work today. And we'll follow up. You know, we have a couple other meetings in the next couple weeks, so we'll be able to make sure we connect on this. Yeah, exactly. All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.